This is the project of me making a table for my garage to serve as a workbench. And the idea was to make the table out of scrap materials that I already had in my garage to conserve on money, budgets, and everything. I'm very blessed, very lucky to have all these tools that I do have. I don't get to use them as often as I used to. I used to have a construction business before I got into real estate, and I just needed a workbench, something that I could have in the garage for hobbies and working on other projects. But I struggle to spend money when I know that I can make things, and I've got these scrap materials in my garage. So decided to build this table, and it turned out to be a great project, both for me and my son, who later comes out to help me. And the overall theme of this table and project altogether has been doing what you can with what you have right now. So much so that the batteries on my tools all died, and so while they were charging, keeping up with that theme of doing what you can with what you have, I switched to hand tools, as you see here, while I waited for them to charge, because I only had a limited time that I could actually work and create this thing. And I just wanted to keep working and not wait for conditions to be perfect. Often I find that I wait for conditions to be perfect, i.e. this video was recorded several months ago and I'm just now recording it, but it's going to get out today. You can see my son dressed in his firefighter costume there in the bottom corner. Originally, my plan was to not have him out there, but he just loves working with his hands and with his tools, and really just loves helping. Such a cool kid, and this ended up being a great bonding experience for he and I. Apologize for the underwear shot. There'll be plenty of that in this video. So these cuts that we're making were to serve as the legs for this table that we're making. And I originally thought that I wanted to keep them all that size, but I ended up changing it in the middle of the project. I didn't really have any real direction that I was going with this, other than I knew I wanted a table in the end and didn't really care how I got there. Of course, the Boba Fett helmet had to make it in. And we started to glue up the legs. I'm going to have them all be laminated together to make a frame what's the idea I had, just because I had all that scrap plywood that we cut into strips. So I throw down some wood glue and started stacking it up. And glue has to be my son's favorite part of any of these projects. He's not such a big fan of the noise the tool makes, but he loves glue and gluing projects. My idea here was to create kind of a finger joint between the layers. So you see I alternate where each piece is overlapping, and then threw in some finish nails to help hold it together while the glue dries. And at that point it was time for a costume change for my son. My wife did such a good job of watching the boys while I worked on this project. I grew up having a wood shop in my parents' house that I had free reign over, and I really miss it. It was something that I used as my own therapy and creative outlet. It's something that I've been struggling to get back into. And kind of the big motivator of this video was to, like I said before, to just do the best with what I have, and both in time and resources and tools. You can see here my son just wanted to get his hands on some tools, so I let him have a hammer and some nails and just told him to practice hitting them in, and he did exactly that. Here I'm just flushing off all the excess so that it looks semi-decent, but it was also probably about here where I decided that I did not want to make all those cuts, and had the idea that I could just sandwich a few sheets of plywood to make the other side of the legs. Or maybe that's not quite here. These leftovers were from when we renovated our house shortly after we bought it. And here's where my second son comes out to help. And before he gets confined to the stroller. If I remember correctly, I think him and his mom go for a walk. This is where I decide I don't want to take as much time cutting strips in the plywood to make the other side of the legs for the table, so we switched the design a little bit. Really am a big fan of these Husky job site totes. They are relatively affordable, especially when you compare them to the name brand options that you can get at Home Depot, but it's held up great. The one issue I do have with it is when you fill it up, obviously it gets so heavy, and when I was working as a contractor, I would just pick it up and throw it in the back of my truck, but that was tough. I really would recommend using it with like a trailer with a ramp. That kind of setup would be a lot better use of that particular tool. So we start sandwiching all of these boards together that have now been cut to width, and beginning our glue up, repeating the exact same process we did before, only this time it's the whole sheet instead of strips. Also decided to throw some screws in there just to give it an extra bit of clamping force to squeeze it all together, because the nails weren't quite doing the job. We're always super conscious to try to at least protect my son's hearing. I should probably be better on my own, but really we just want to make sure that we're not hurting his young ears. So this here was something that he wanted to build, and so I did what I could to best facilitate and try to get out of his way and just let him do his thing and ask him what it is he wants to make, and just kind of be a guiding force instead of telling him exactly what to do. Watching these time lapses always makes me wish that I could move this fast. And then we had our sets of legs. And there's a butt crack. Now came the part where we need to secure both of the legs together. I just threw on this about 8-inch wide scrap, threw it on the floor, and I think I squared it up. I vaguely remember squaring it up. Or maybe I was just counting on the floor to square it up. Drove in some screws. There we go. Okay, good. We did square it up. Just add a little bit more bracing just to help hold the whole thing together. The whole point of this table was to not make anything pretty, but purely functional, and again out of scraps. And I think there's something to be said about that aesthetic of things that are built just to be functional. Especially when it comes to something like a cheap free workbench kind of thing. And I start nailing on the tabletop with just glue and putting in finished nails. do have a climbing rope in our garage that I put in. We use it for fun, for fitness, and sometimes it gets annoying, but we still like it. And we start layering on more sheets of particle board that came from a shelf that was in the garage when we bought the home, that I dismantled just because we didn't need that shelf anymore. And my second son and wife return home from their walk. Of course, he then wanted to help and get his time in with the hammer while the missus watched us finish the project. Now that the bench was finished, I had to clear out a space for it to go. I added on a couple of bracing from the shelf that we took it apart from and put it in, and then it was time to clean up the garage. I do tend to make a mess whenever I do these kind of projects, but the best part of this project was seeing my son get to participate in this, and he was so proud of what we had made at the end. And he wanted to paint this table. He was just so proud, and for weeks he was talking about it, about the table that him and his dad got to make. It was a great experience, and we'll see this table in future videos because it's where I do all of them. Yep.